On today's episode of the Bourbon Bytes Podcast, we're looking at several new whiskey releases, including Jim Beam's Knob Creek 21-year-old bourbon, Slash's Incantation Volume 2 mead-finished bourbon, and the latest release of a Midwinter's Night Dram from High West. Plus, I'm kicking spooky season off with a very scary pour dough ball cookie dough flavored whiskey. Let's see how this goes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bourbon Bytes Podcast. I'm your host, Clifton, and this is the week of October 9th, 2025. As I mentioned last week, we're going to get into some spooky pours to celebrate this season, and today's whiskey review is no exception. But before we get into that, we have some whiskey news to talk about. For the past week or so, I've been getting several emails from distilleries about their new whiskey releases and new labels coming soon. So we're going to highlight a few of those before getting into our review, but welcome to the show. Thank you for listening in. If it's your first time here, welcome. This podcast is all about whiskey news and reviews with a gaming twist, so we don't really have any gaming news this week, but I do want to mention something that people are getting very up in arms about. Rock Band 4 and all of the DLC associated with it is going to be delisted from the PlayStation and Xbox stores. It's been 10 years since this game came out, and a lot of the music licenses are expiring, so fans are calling this a crime against gaming. I think that's one of those things that happens when you license real music for a game like that is, they don't have those rights forever. So while I never really played those games growing up, mainly because, if you don't know, I am an amputee. I am missing my right arm, so I could never play any of those guitar, drumming games. It just didn't really work for my setup. Now, I'm sure there's some accessibility controls I could, adapt it to and try it now as an adult. But yeah, it never really piqued my interest. But fans are upset about that. And it makes you wonder, should they keep those games up with just the other tracks that haven't, had a license expire? Or are those even playable, right? Could you continue to sell it and then remove most of the main features that came with the game when it first came out? It's an interesting topic. I guess they could always just replace it with generic, library music, not recognizable songs, but that's not any fun. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Are you guys upset about things like that, or would you rather them keep a version of it up in the store? Now, I'm not saying there aren't ways that you could probably get that game and a copy of it and save it locally, not to advocate against, piracy. But if you own the game, I think ROMs are legal. So check that out. But before I get this podcast banned, let's go ahead and move into our whiskey news for the week. Now, the first of these isn't actually a new whiskey, but it's a new to me whiskey, and it has a brand new label. So a couple years back, Barrell Craft Spirits released a Barrel Foundation 5-year bourbon, and it was pretty well received. And apparently they launched a double barrel version of it for 2025. I wasn't aware, but they've changed up the label now to make it a little bit more unique on the shelves. I think that's something that I've always kind of, felt about Barrell's products is a lot of the labels look pretty similar, but this new label for the double barrel release has a textured background. So it's a similar color, but there's a bit of I guess maybe a barrel looking texture to it. It's very it's bright orange, so it's hard to really tell what they're going for here. But it's made to help it be a standout against the regular release. I think maybe there was some confusion among fans of whether it was the double barrel or the regular one. Although the old label, I was looking at it and it still says double barrel. So I guess the coloring scheme may have been confusing because it was the same color. I don't know, but this whiskey did win a 96-point score from Wine Enthusiast, a 91-point score from Whiskey Advocate, and platinum in the LA Spirits Awards, as well as the American Spirits Council of Tasters. So I'm going to have to keep an eye out for this bottle. I haven't had it. I was a big fan of the regular Foundation. I thought it was a solid addition to their lineup, but Double Barrel sounds really, really good. So I'll keep an eye out for this brand new label. Now, speaking of new labels, I'm taking a look over at our friend Cumming Whiskey over on Instagram. That is Jacob. If you're not yet following him, he is a great resource for the whiskey community. And one bottle label caught my eye, and mainly because it looks a little Halloween-y. It's called Incantation Volume 2, and this is from Slash is the brand. I'm not very familiar with them, but this is a straight bourbon whiskey finished in a mead barrel, which is something that I've never really heard done. I mean, I know people finish things in a honey barrel, but I don't think I've ever seen a mead-finished whiskey. Sounds very, very nice, though. It's 51.5% ABV, so 103 proof. And they're actually based out of Winter Park, Florida. The back of the bottle says, for the second release in our Mead-Barrel maturation series, Incantation, we set out to highlight one of the most distinctive aspects of Zymarium meadery's barrel-aged meads, treatments. This particular barrel once held a mead infused with over 200 vanilla beans, allowing its flavor to develop richness and depth. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. So that vanilla mead actually spent 10 months in apple brandy barrels. And on the day that it was emptied, they filled it with their bourbon blend. So there's definitely, I see what they're talking about, layers. Like we're talking about a apple brandy barrel that was used to age mead that had vanilla beans, and now they're putting bourbon in it. So I'm excited to see this. I would definitely keep an eye out. I've not, like I said, heard of the brand before, but I see, a couple of people in the comments excited for this release. I'm excited, especially seeing that it's higher proof. It's not like it's going to be a flavored whiskey, which, speaking of which, we'll get into one of those later today. But yeah, I like all those impacts from those barrels. Bottling it high proof, 103 proof is a pretty impressive move. Now, I wish we knew a little bit about the bourbon. We do know that it is a straight bourbon whiskey, but that's about it. So I'd love to know more about where this is from. If I had to guess, probably Indiana, but there's nothing wrong with that. All right, well, another email that ended up in my inbox this week was Beam's Fall Bourbon lineup. They've just announced 2 new releases, the Hardin Creek batch for 2025 and the Knob Creek 21 year. Now, I'd heard of the Knob Creek because our friend Fred actually ended up with a bottle of the 21-year-old release. It seems like quite a bit of folks got a chance to try it at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. I'm seeing it pop up on a lot of YouTube channels. I know Cameron from Drums and Drams did a review, as well as Bourbon Junkies. So I am definitely keeping an eye out for that. I am a huge Knob Creek fan. I really enjoyed the 18-year that I had. The first 15-year I had was a bit of a miss, but I've heard that later batches have come out quite a bit better. Now, the label for this release was posted on the TTB back in April, actually. So that's all I really know about it. Like I said, 21 years old, 100 proof, so it's not going to be cast strength. It's going to be the standard proof as their main core age-dated lineup. Now, retail on this bottle is $250, which I think puts it in line with the other releases. I think it's fair for a 21-year-old bourbon. That's not something you see every day. Would I like it to be maybe a higher proof release for that price? Absolutely. But I'm definitely going to keep an eye out for this one. Now, unfortunately, I don't think I am on Jim Beam's PR list, but if anyone has a contact out there that would be willing to send me a sample, let me know. And maybe let Adriana from Whiskey Mountains and Women of Whiskeys know as well, because I'm sure she is dying to try this bottle. Now, I don't know too much about the Hardin's Creek release. I know it's going to be launched on October 17th. So as I learn more about that new one, I will share it here on the podcast. So 2 really cool releases, and one that I am very excited. The other, I'll wait and see. Now, one last note, Jim Beam is offering a Friendsgiving event on November 13th at the distillery. You get to join Fred and Freddie No for bourbon and Thanksgiving feast. Featuring pours like Little Book, The Infinite 2, Booker's The Reserves 2, of course, Knob Creek 21 that we just talked about, and Jim Beam Lineage Batch 2. This is happening on November 13th at the distillery from 6 to 9 p.m. Price is $150 per person, which sounds like a good time. I mean, if I was there, I'd love to absolutely hang with those folks and have a wonderful Thanksgiving meal and try some incredible bourbon. So if you are in the area and looking to attend, let me know how it goes. All right, well, last whiskey release to talk about today is the announcement of the High West Distillery Midwinter Nights Dram Act 13. So the last one I actually had was Act 11, so it's been a couple years since I've had this one, but they just released the info on this particular bottle. It's going to retail for $150. It's available to purchase actually on their website now. They say it is a blend of straight rye whiskeys ranging in age from 4 to 10 years old, finished in ruby and tawny port barrels. This has always been a favorite of mine. I think it's, just an exceptional pour, coming in at 98.6 proof. I always think of it as the perfect holiday whiskey. And, now's about the time to be buying those Thanksgiving and Christmas pours before it's too late. So I'm going to keep an eye out for this new release. I'm a big fan of Act 11, and I've always been a fan of this lineup. So looking forward to getting a chance to try it. I know people are kind of a little upset with the pricing going up to closer to $150. I think I paid $120-ish, $130 for my last one. But that was straight from the distillery. I actually had a chance to buy it after doing a tasting and tour of the distillery when I was there. So I had to pull the trigger on it then. But this one, I might just wait to see if it pops up locally and then just see how I'm feeling and if I'm willing to pull the trigger at the moment. But I have traditionally really enjoyed these pours, and I'm sure this year's release is no exception. All right, well, that does it for news this week. I realized last week's episode was a bit long, so I'm going to keep this one a little bit shorter, but we do still have our bite-sized review. So, like I teased earlier on, the month of October, I'm doing things that are either bottles that I've had for a while but I've been scared to try, or bottles that have been eyeing me from the liquor store shelf, and I've not really had an occasion to buy them, but they kind of scare me a little bit. But we're going to try them for this spooky month this year. The first of which is a sample bottle that has been sitting in my closet for well over a year and a half now. I bought this for a live stream like a year and a half ago, and I just had too many flavored whiskeys to do. So I set this aside. I was like, it didn't really fit the theme, but I figured since it is almost holiday season, you could be cozying up with a bottle of a Midwinter's Night Dram, or you could be having a shot of this while you're baking cookies with the family. So if you don't know already, I'm talking about Dough Ball Cookie Dough Whiskey. This is a whiskey with natural flavors and caramel color. Just want to get that out off the bat. And it's coming in at 35% ABV or 70 proof. Now, this is produced and bottled by Patco Brands out of Fairfield, California. And I will say, I've seen these Dough Ball bottles on the shelves for a couple of years now. And I think they have a pretty good fan base and a nice following. Now, whether or not these are the same people that are drinking a Midwinter's Night Dram, I highly doubt it. But I've seen a few reviews where people are saying, like, I don't want to like this, but I really like it. And I kind of feel like that's how I am with some flavored whiskeys. You know, I am still a big fan of Fireball. You know, it's a joke, but I feel like on the right occasion, a nice cold pour of that out of the freezer will get you going on any day. I also liked, what was it? Screwball peanut butter whiskey that came out probably like 5 years ago now. But that was one of my favorite flavored whiskeys, I think, because it still had a lot of the whiskey flavor and it wasn't overwhelming with the sweetness. Now, a couple weeks back, I did a live stream where I tasted through 3 different new flavored whiskeys, including the Jack Daniel's Blackberry, the Jim Beam Pineapple, and the Crown Royal Chocolate. So if you missed that, check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Bourbon Bytes. I go live almost every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. Would love to have you as a subscriber and viewer over there if you're just here for the podcast. You can also find me everywhere on the web, bourbonbytes.com, Bytes with a Y as it's spelled here on the podcast. There's a link to my Instagram, my TikTok, my podcast, which you obviously have already found, the YouTube channel, some really cool merch, and my favorite part, the Byte Club membership, which is your way to support the channel for as little as $2 a month. You can make a huge impact, allowing me to buy crazy whiskeys like this one, and also supporting the channel in other ways. But do check that out. I noticed we've been getting quite a few new free members on Patreon, which is all great. But I would rather, if you're going to be a free member, I'd rather you join the bourbonbytes.com Byte Club. That way, it's just kind of more of a my hub for place on the internet. Not that Patreon's going anywhere. I'll still be posting on there as well. But I'd like you, if you're going to join for free, come on down to the Byte Club. Shout out to newest free members, Chance, James, Rance, Jim, Dana, and Devil Dog 1. Like I said, bourbonbytes.com. There's also a link to our Discord server, which includes tons of fun channels to share your interests and passions and what you've been drinking lately. So check it out. Byte Club members get access to exclusive rooms depending on their tier, including our monthly movie night, where we watch a retro movie. It's October, so we're definitely going to do a 80s horror movie this month. So I'll start thinking about what we do. I think someone recommended The Fly. I haven't seen it, but someone mentioned that as a good 80s horror movie to watch. So let me know if that's something you want me to watch or if there's anything else that comes to mind. You also can get access to our monthly tasting subscription box, where I send you samples every month. You can get that at the Bourbon Terabyte tier. It's a great group of guys who get together and drink whiskey. And if you want to join us, all you got to do is join the Byte Club. So that's it with the plugs. Let's go ahead and get into this Dough Ball Cookie Dough Whiskey. Now, perhaps you're supposed to be drinking this as either a shot or a cocktail or over ice. I'm going to do it neat because I feel like putting it over ice is probably going to bring down some of the flavors a bit, and I want to give an honest first impression of this whiskey. So we're going to do it neat for today's review. Let's go ahead and give this a nose. Okay, not too much, honestly. I thought this was going to be like crazy sweet on the nose. It's sweet, but it's almost like a chocolate, like a melted chocolate chip note. It doesn't say chocolate chip cookie dough, which is kind of why I'm surprised. I kind of thought it'd be more of just like a generic cookie dough note, but there's like a good chocolate note there that kind of reminds me of the Crown Royal chocolate, but this one's a little bit more of like a melty kind of chocolate, like the chocolate that would be in a chocolate chip cookie. There's also a good bit of vanilla there, and I think, unfortunately, that's probably mostly coming from the artificial flavor. I don't think that's really coming from the whiskey itself. We don't know, by the way, if this is a bourbon, if this is a Canadian whiskey. Most likely, it's either American whiskey or Canadian whiskey. A super young whiskey usually is what they go for. I know Fireball is, I think, Canadian whiskey, if I remember correctly. But a lot of them just use, barely aged whiskey. That's why they don't have to call it like a straight bourbon or anything like that. They can use, as long as it touches wood and it's been aged in wood, they can call it a whiskey. But honestly, I'm pretty impressed that this isn't as sweet on the nose. Now, I'm hoping the palate holds up because I've said this before, but I'm not a fan of flavored whiskeys that are overly sweet. It's something that I find in almost all of them, unfortunately. I feel like they try to compensate, the flavor with just like tons of sugar. And it's just so overwhelming, especially if you want to use it in a cocktail. It's like you don't need to add any sugar to it because it's so sweet already. I'd actually prefer things to be a little bit more natural. That way you can, like I said, mix it into a cocktail, add some simple syrup, maybe some vermouth. But, making it so sweet, it makes it hard to do anything with, in my opinion. But maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm not the target audience. But let's go and give this Doughball cookie dough whiskey a taste. Cheers. Okay, yeah, there's the cookie dough flavor. I still get a little bit of that chocolate chip note. Like I said, like a milk chocolate melty. But honestly, the flavor, they kind of nailed it. Like it kind of does taste like a chewy kind of cookie. Like, not necessarily like raw cookie dough, because I think that has a very specific, I don't know, there's something about raw cookie dough that has a little bit slightly different of a flavor. I think it's a little more vanilla. Whereas a baked cookie has a bit more of those toasty dessert quality elements to it. I think this has that. I think it has a little bit of like a toasted pie crust kind of note that I think attributes really well to a baked cookie. I'm going to go for a second sip. I'm pleasantly surprised by that first one. Yeah, unfortunately, it's sweet, right? I think I was hoping that it wasn't going to be that crazy sweet, but I figured with a cookie dough flavored whiskey, you can't really expect it not to be. It's viscous, but in a way that's just because it's the sugar sticking to your tongue. And finish-wise, it actually has quite a bit of a kick for 70 proof. I prefer these to be at least 80 proof, which some whiskeys have been that are flavored. But this one, unfortunately, is 70. Now, I guess our target audience probably wants something smooth, as I should say. But this is, a pretty complex flavored whiskey. Like I said, starts out with that melted chocolate. There's a little bit of like toasted marshmallow there as well. But there is a baked good note, like a, I said pie crust, but I mean, it probably is just cookie, let's be real. But they've nailed this flavor. It does say made with natural flavors. We don't really know what that means, but they at least tastes like a cookie. So if that's their goal, they nailed it. Is it made for someone like you and me that just likes to drink a whiskey that tastes like whiskey? Probably not. I'm going to have to give this whiskey a rating based on, my feelings towards it. It is a flavored whiskey, so I'm going to treat it as such. Fun fact, this one actually won double gold at the San Francisco International Spirits Competition, as well as the Proof Awards Unmasked, where it won double gold, and Proof Awards Masked, where it won gold. So it's doing really well. Forbes magazine actually called it the best of class flavored whiskey when they reviewed it. So, I think there is a place for it. It just may not belong on my whiskey shelf. Now, pricing-wise, I'm not sure if I mentioned that. I don't think I did. This bottle goes for about $25, which is relatively high. I got a mini bottle for about $2.50. But for a flavored whiskey, that's, pretty up there. And I think the way that this tastes is justified. But I know that something like Fireball, which is mass produced, is, not half the price, but almost half the price. So I do think it's steep in its category, but that doesn't mean it's bad by any means. Out of 10, this is tough because I feel like I don't think I've ever given a flavored whiskey a rating out of 10. I just feel like I say my ratings for like, okay, this is going to be mean. I like serious whiskeys, which, that's not an insult. I don't think cookie dough flavored whiskey takes itself too seriously in terms of like being a well-reviewed whiskey in the bourbon influencer circle, But I will say it's a little sweet for me. It's a little pricey, but it's not bad by any means. So this one's going to get a 5 out of 10. It's not something I would buy again. It's something that I would probably have, as a fun shot with some friends. Maybe make it into a cocktail, but even that, it's so sweet that I don't know if it would even hold up in a cocktail. So this one might be better just enjoyed over ice as a way to wind down after a long day. But it's definitely made for somebody. That somebody just isn't me. So I'm glad I had a chance to try it, though. Let me know if there's other crazy flavored whiskeys you want me to review. Like I said, this month of October, I'm doing some bottles I've been scared to review for various reasons. And I say that because I don't actually know what I'm reviewing next week, but I'll figure it out before then. So let me know if you have any recommendations or suggestions of what I should pick up to review. And I think that does it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Like I said, it's a little shorter than usual, I think, but doesn't mean it's not a good time. So make sure to follow me on your favorite podcast platform. If you're watching this on somewhere like YouTube, hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment there on the channel. But most of all, thank you so much for listening. I'll be back next week with even more whiskey and video game news, plus another bite-sized review. All right, y'all, cheers. Have a great rest of your week. And until then, this has been Bourbon Bytes, a whiskey podcast with a gaming twist. Cheers, and I'll see you next episode.